This is Kanzenshuu, the podcast, episode 454 for the week of September 16th, 2018. Welcome back to Kanzenshuu,
the podcast,
an extension of the all-encompassing Dragon Ball fan site.
Kanzenshuu.
We cover anything and everything Dragon Ball in hopes of enlightening and a little bit of entertaining. Joining me over there, it's Meri. Hello.
Hi.
I believe you at one time ran a website.
I did.
Written here, it says Temple of Trunks.
Celebrating 20 years of being on the interwebs. Maybe not active on the interwebs, but being on the interwebs. 20 years. 20 years wiser. 20 years just as flamboyantly exuberant over a certain purple hair Wonder Boy.
You had your moment yesterday.
You
actually did.
I had 2 moments.
That's Meri. I am Mike. Vegito EX is going to be the two of us chatting out a little thing. One more person is going to join briefly. You'll go away. And then Jake Herms is going to join me to talk about something. Let's talk about what's going on this episode. Meri, you and I went to the movies yesterday.
Going to the movies.
Had a little date. Watched a little movie.
You may have heard of it. It stars a guy.
Yeah, we went and we saw a dubbed movie 8 in theaters. Not a thing I ever thought would happen.
And I knew it had to happen when it was just a harmless Saturday, I guess, late morning. And we're just each doing our own thing. I'm up on the computer, you're downstairs doing something, and like, hey, Meri, well, I go see movie 8 in theaters. And I laugh. I'm like, what? And I realize that you're being serious. And I'm like, well, if you're, okay, clearly you're not joking, which means, yes, we need to go do this.
It's one of those things where I'm like, please say no. Please say no.
You wanted me to say no?
I wanted an excuse not to go, but I knew I had to. I mentioned this last week on the show where we knew this screening was coming. I knew it was coming, but I kind of forgot the exact date. And then the 15th rolled around. I'm like, oh no, I missed it. I'm not going to be able to get to. Oh man, like 3/4 of the seats are still available. All right, I really have no excuses.
And the movie
point.
theater that's playing it is 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
Basically.
So we did that. We're going to talk a little bit of our experience there. And then actually before that, Jake is going to join me to chat about a certain character in Dragon Ball Super. He's at the top of the charts.
Oh, it's not Broly.
Right now, no, it's not Broly. We're going to talk about Toppo, his name, but you know the way we do things here at Kanzenshuu, you're going to get a Japanese language history lesson in the process of just trying to arrive at one character's name. Successfully, unsuccessfully, you be the judge of that. And that's what's on tap for this here episode of our podcast. So actually, why don't we just get into that right now?
Kind of already did.
Jake and I are going to talk about Toppo, and then Meri, you'll join me on the flip side, and we'll talk about some dub and Broly stuff, and that's our episode. So let's jump to our Toppo discussion right now. Joining me for a little, I guess you could call it news, naming check-in, Jake, it's the Herms Meister himself. Hello, sir.
Hello.
How's Hawaii treating you right now? It's been kind of rough over there.
It's been a little rainy, but, haven't had major problems on this island.
All right, good.
Some of the others.
I think about you every time I see the news, like, oh, there's another storm coming. Jeez. All right. You and I want to check in real briefly on a name. Believe it or not, actually, so you texted me, was it like yesterday, you had a topic you wanted to do about Funimation's English dub, something very specific. I'm like, what, really? Oh, yeah. All right. That's actually a topic. We should do that. We're going to hold on to that. And then I asked you to do something that is kind of sparked by Funimation's English dub. The dub has reached the Universe Survival arc. We're into exhibition match stuff there in the pre-tournament of Power. And a certain character has appeared and has been named something that I honestly don't think anyone was expecting this, simply because we're in such a weird era of ignoring fan subs and ignoring Kanzenshuu name spelling sometimes. Things like Dokkan Battle, things like Dragon Ball Legends, things like Xenoverse 2, international releases of things, the simulcast subs. Name spellings are, they're as standardized and as loose as they've ever been before, it seems, these days. So Funimation's English dub, the big old character blocked to blast, and his name's Top. Jake, real briefly, the Universe 11 characters that we end up seeing later in the series, what is the name pun scheme for them?
Because they have a sort of kitchen implements theme going. And so the character in question, Toppo or Top, it's from pot. And Jiren is from range, as in a stove and oven, like a kitchen range.
Yeah. The oven range, yep.
And then dispo from garbage disposal. Casserole from casserole.
I just said oven. Isn't there actually a character who's oven rearranged as well?
Yeah, I think it's the blue one. Or no, I think it's Agumon, who is the lizard, orange lizard guy who is oven. I don't know. It's one of them. This hasn't been officially confirmed. Like, I don't think any official source has, like, flat out said, like, oh, this is where their names are from. But it seems to fit. It fits pretty well, you know. Nothing else really makes any sense.
Unlike some other characters where, like, this is our best guess, when there are consistent themes, that gives us kind of a better idea of where to look for certain names rather than one-offs. When there's, 5 or 6 of them together, it's a little easier. All right, so maybe you can break this down for me. Let's actually skip back a little bit, because this is the common example I see. It's like, hey, you don't call him Hitto. No, of course we don't call him Hitto. His name is Hit. Why, ignoring Toppo for a second, why is Hit's name Hit and not Hitto?
So the thing with Japanese is that it has a fairly limited range of syllables in the language.
Yeah.
So whenever they're trying to adapt a foreign word into their language, they have to basically do the best they can. And so one of the phenomenons this gives rise to is what you might call dropped syllables, where so in Japanese, in their hiragana and katakana alphabets, there's no single letter for like just a K or a T or any of those consonants. Rather, they have they instead have a letter for ka or ki, etc., etc.
Yep.
Okay, so when they're trying to adapt an English word into their language that ends in a consonant, then they essentially have to just pick one of these letters to represent that stop.
Yeah.
And so what they do with most of the consonants is that the K sound will be that dropped syllable. And so, like, for instance, with black, like Goku Black, when you write the English word black into Japanese, the way they write it, if you directly transliterate that back to English using the Hepburn romanization system, it's actually B-U-R-A-K-K-U. So you see twice over that there's a U after the first B and then a U at the end.
Right.
From the perspective of the English word black, they're just extraneous. They're only there because the Japanese language doesn't allow you to just write out B-L-A-C-K.
Right. And I guess the odd thing there is, all right, why is there a doubled K sound?
And, well, the doubled K in this case, well, partially it's to adapt the CK. CK
sure. Oh, yeah, sure.
KKU in Japanese.
So maybe this is the bad choice, but it still works.
Yeah. And then we see also, of course, there are characters like Zamas, who is based on, his name also ends in a U, but because his name derives from a Japanese word, when we're writing this in English, I mean, we choose to keep the U at the end. I believe, the Viz manga, they drop it. It's kind of it's a more of gray area. But on the other hand, like an actual Japanese person's name, like, say, voice actress Mayumi Tanaka, M-A-U-M-I, nobody drops the U out of her name because it's from Japanese, and that's just the
sure.
standard way of representing native Japanese names in English.
Well, I think we're at a good comparison point there. So we had something like buraku. It's just an approximation of the English word black, and we know what that is. But then you got into something like zamasu. There's an example right there where ignore Kanzenshuu entirely. The official American licensees have decided to go separate ways with their spellings there. Funimation's English dub uses the U at the end, whereas Viz's English translation of the manga drops the U at the end. So you can't even pin this one on Kanzenshuu. It's the official companies there that decide to go different ways with it there. So let's continue then. The character Hit, I think that kind of pulls in some of what we were talking about, where they're approximating an English word, right?
Yeah, and so this is where it gets a little tricky because, like I was saying, with most of the consonant sounds, it's the U sound that is used for a dropped syllable. But then this kind of breaks down with the T's because they don't have a straight up TU sound in Japanese. Rather, they have TSU, that kind of sound.
Yeah.
And so instead, what they use for the drop syllable when it comes to T and D sounds is TO or DO. So big example, right in the title of the series, Dragon Ball, English word dragon is rendered in Japanese literally as DO Ragon. As an extension of that, you have Kakarot with Goku's name, where the ROTTO sound is used to approximate the ROT sound in English.
Mm-hmm.
And this carries over to a lot of words that are a lot of three-letter words in English that end in T. When they're rendered in Japanese, they approximate that sound with the doubled consonant.
Doubled
so even
T-O.
though, like,
yeah.
So even though in English it's like bat, B-A-T, but then in Japanese it's B-A-T-T-O.
Batto. Got it.
And so hit is a perfect example of that. So his name comes from the English word hit, as in like a hitman. Yeah, so that's why Hito, it's not, it's kind of pointless to write it as Hitto because we know that this comes from the English word hit and there's no real reason to keep that extra 2 letters on the end when writing this guy's name, when rendering this name back in English.
That's one of those things where we talk a lot about with our name spellings. We're looking at a spelling, we're looking at a pun source, and we're looking at preserving some kind of pronunciation where appropriate. And a name like Hit, it's not appropriate to keep those extraneous syllables. That was just their concession of like even roughly getting there.
Yeah, and of course the big way that this trips us up with the series is with Kakarot fusing with Vegeta into Vegito.
Sure.
Where it's like, it makes sense to, with Kakarot, it's a pun on carrot. It makes sense to end that with just a T instead of TTO. But then it looks really strange when Kakarot and Vegeta fuse into Vegete.
Yeah, I actually have an article, at least one, in the press archive where that was an accepted name spelling for Vegito early on. Veget or double T at the end. It's like, that's what they're doing there. But yeah, you definitely lose something there. And Viz, again, made a concession, and it was an intent adaptation, which is certainly one way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, if he was just a guy named Vegeta with no connection to previous character names, it would make perfect sense to adapt that as just Veget.
Yeah.
But then it looks strange, like when you consider it as a combination of Vegeta and Kakarot, it looks like you just took a letter off Vegeta's name.
Yeah, it looks like you forgot who a character is, or how to spell a name. One thing that comes to mind, just in light of actually movie 8 right now, I was thinking back to when Steve Simmons did the original translation for Funimation's DVD. I believe there's one instance in particular in the movie where Broly goes, not just Kakaroto, he goes, Kakaroto! Like he almost pauses for a second on that hard consonant sound. And I believe the way that Steve handled that, because you have such a disconnect between what you're seeing in the subtitles and hearing from the dialogue. I think he did like a -O at the end of just that one in particular. It's like, what do you do with something like that? It's tough. All right, so now let's jump further ahead. We've explained double consonant sounds, dropped vowel sounds, concessions, adaptations of names. So walk me through Toppo. First of all, why do you think in general folks just kept the name, ourselves included at Kanzenshuu, as is?
Yeah, so this is the kind of weird thing that the name does. So the English word pot, so there's a pun on pot. The English word pot is rendered in Japanese Potto. So this is, again, another example of using TTO to render what in English is just a single T.
Yeah.
And so, but then the name Toppo takes that and it's an anagram, so it switches it around so that now the T becomes TOPPO. So the O that was extraneous in the word pot is now actually in the middle of the word.
Yeah.
In the middle of the name Toppo.
Yeah, even though the O is in the right place, it's actually the wrong extraneous one.
Yeah, it's a very weird thing to explain in audio if you don't, to people who aren't necessarily familiar with Japanese writing system, but take my word, it makes sense when you see it all written out. And so this does mean that, like, if you were to very literally render this type of anagram into English, what you would actually get is like TPO.
Yeah. Because,
the dropped syllables in the middle of the thing, and then the actual original O from the middle of the word pot is at the end. So, yeah.
Is Raccoon's name a similar example to this, of where the wrong syllables are when you try to adapt to Peck?
Yeah, like quote-unquote wrong. But so Raccoon from cream, that's the drop syllable between the K and the R sound, which when you rearrange his name, it comes in the middle of his name now, and it's extended as well, becomes an extended vowel sound. Which is also never used for drop syllables, kind of by definition.
Right. Well, and that's what makes it more of a pun than just the word as is, or even just the anagram as is.
Yeah, so it's a kind of weird thing where the whole recoom, the coom doesn't...
Yeah, that's the
exist
nothing.
in the word cream at all. And I believe, doesn't Steve Simmons subtitles, doesn't he like capitalize?
He might capitalize the C, yeah. Or did at one point,
just to kind of help emphasize that. But yeah, if you were to try and like render, if you were trying to be like super, super exact, then when you're writing his name, you might want to do like REAC''M.
And I've certainly seen that. And people, when you're not used to it and when you're not really trying to give it some critical thought, you're taken aback by that. But think about it from, in a void, not having any kind of licensed version of the series available. If you're trying to preserve these pronunciations and they're all dairy products, you look at it and go, what do I do with this?
So this is why comparing Toppo directly to Hito, it seems logical if you kind of sort of know a few things about how this romanization thing works with Japanese, but
like you said, right off the bat, it's an anagram rather than just the word as is. So that's the initial complication.
And then complication 2 is that P, like I was saying before, for the drop syllable for P sounds is PU and not PO. O is only used for drop syllables with T or D sounds. And so that's why if you're writing the English word top in Japanese, it would be TOPPU rather than TOPPO.
Gotcha.
So yeah, like in English, you can take pot and just rearrange it into top, but you can't do that with the like poto doesn't rearrange
right.
into.
All right, so the character's name is actually an anagram of a vowel change.
Something like that.
All right.
But anyway, so this is the reason why when the character was introduced, like me and like fandom at large, and also the Toei subtitles on Crunchyroll and the Viz manga, that's why all these people, like, they didn't just, that's why they kept it as TOPPO for the character's name. They didn't just automatically slice off the PO the same way we did with hit. There is undeniably a difference between hit and Toppo. Like, that's just linguistically, it's there. They might seem similar, but they are not equivalent cases.
Okay.
But that still leaves the question of, was this a bad choice on Funimation's part to just go with top for the character? And that's a more murky area.
Yeah.
Because it does, so top is not a direct romanization of Toppo, the same way that hit is of Hito, but it still does work to make the pun obvious to an English audience who wouldn't necessarily understand where the extra PO is coming from. Because, like I said, the extra PO at the end only makes sense in the context of the Japanese katakana alphabet.
Got it. Mostly. So, what's your opinion? I think we're gonna stick with Toppo, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no reason. It's perfectly valid to use Toppo, and I wouldn't say it's invalid to use top. I think it's slightly less ideal, but I think they're well within their rights to go with that option. But at the same time, there's no reason it should affect us.
For
Toppo's
sure.
Toppo is perfectly valid. It was valid from day one. It's still valid no matter what Funimation has done. There's no reason for us to change, but at the same time, if people who do follow the dub, they're like, well, I guess I'll just use top. And, I mean, that that's their right too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to criticize anyone for going with this. I think it's a fuzzier area because it is Funimation trying to make an actual legitimate effort to make the source behind these names clear to an English audience.
Right, as opposed to some other things where we just have flat out name changes entirely or mostly name changes, like Paikon only vaguely resembles Paikuhan and doesn't make any attempt to convey the pun.
So in that sense, changing Toppo to top is kind of like with what Viz did with changing Vegito to Vegerat.
Yeah. Do you think Funimation will do anything else with any other names in particular? What would be your call for what you see them doing with the character that seems to, in all likelihood, be based on Vermouth?
Yeah, that's the other thing is, so far the Toei subtitles and then the Viz manga have both gone with Belmod for that character, which is, again, a thing where it's that's a legitimate way of transcribing that name into English, but since we know his name comes from Vermouth, it would be closer to the name pun to do Vermod.
Yeah.
This obviously shows that they're willing to just break with what's been established with the Crunchyroll subtitles and the Viz manga.
Yeah.
And also, other, random cards. And there's been a lot of secondary merchandise that has also been using spellings.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, it's so different today than it was just when, like Z was coming out in America, you can't even compare the situations anymore. The amount of simultaneous merchandise is crazy.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if they did something unusual, well, not unusual, but if they tried to be more faithful with the Belmod Vermod pun.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, I did joke yesterday, like, oh, maybe they're going to spell Jiran, Geran, to make it the range pun more obvious.
That'd be valid, for sure.
Yeah. God, was it earlier this year? Whenever they had the big special, episode 109 and 110 of Super.
Yeah,
that was last October. But yeah, so, they did the kind of simulcast. Funimation did a kind of...
Yeah, a little party thing.
Yeah, and for that, they spelt it Jaren. So it would be, they've already set that precedent for themselves within their own material. So, I mean, it's not impossible, but based on that, I would assume they're just going to stick with Jaren.
Jaren or Jaren? Right. I was going to say, I don't remember seeing it exactly like that. Yeah, Toppo seems like such a main character. Maybe they hadn't super referenced him that much compared to Jiren, but I don't know. I'm looking forward to it, and I think I just want to use this as a great example of, ignore us. Ignore what Kanzenshu's doing. Look at the actual companies and see how they're having the exact same conversations and frustrations. And how do we adapt this name? What's the best way to adapt this name? What's the most search engine friendly way of adapting this name, which is certainly something that was brought up. Sabat mentioned that with Beerus in particular, a name spelling we had been using previously, and they ended up agreeing with using something like that. And he cited, you search for beers online and you're going to get beer. You search for Beer Us, that's going to be the Dragon Ball character. It seems like it's the exact opposite here. Toppo is undeniably going to be the Dragon Ball character. Good luck searching for Top on Google.
Yeah, that's it seems like they're using different logic than they did with Beerus, which, I mean, it's not necessarily wrong. I mean, obviously, it would have also been Google friendly if they had spelled Piccolo with a Y or something, but
sure.
I'm glad they didn't do that back in the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's you do kind of have to take it on a more case-by-case basis rather than coming up with overarching rules to apply in every single context.
Right. It's an art and not a science, but it's also a science, and all of the rules fall flat on themselves as you continue doing this kind of stuff. Anything else? I feel like that kind of clears it up, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that should be everything.
Well, thank you much, Jake. At this point, we shall return people to their regularly scheduled rest of the Kanzenshuu podcast. Talk to you next time. Meri, welcome back.
Oh, what a journey it's been.
All right, so it's Kanzenshuu. You know what you're here for. You know what you're in for. So
you are in for such authoritative discussion on the dub English language version of this property. That was sarcasm, people. We are not authorities. We don't live it and breathe it every day.
I'm acting. I'm a character.
Do you feel better now, Mike? Do you feel better?
Slightly
That was very
better.
juvenile.
It really was. You know what?
This is not 1999.
Every decade or so, I got to get one in, though. Right?
I don't know.
I'm allowed something. Give me something here.
Okay, fine.
Please.
Reel it back in.
All right,
so
as we mentioned last week on the show, the movie 8 script is widely regarded as, hey, they tried for a little bit here.
That was the biggest thing I took away from it, not knowing how the movies have been treated in English.
Yeah.
Other than the first 3. So even within the first couple minutes, I was like, wow, I remember these lines. Holy free molies.
I mean, they're hitting all the big points. My hobbies are reading and sports. And you get that, and you're kind of good to go.
Yeah. That set me in the good mood, too.
It felt a little looser as the movie went on. And we started getting to things when characters were running away off screen or turning away off screen. I'm like, there's no dialogue there. I see what you're doing. The typical kind of punch up kind of things. And then I've never seen this movie dubbed in my life, so this is effectively brand new to me. But I was shocked that if you're going to get reading and sports right, you're not going to nail I'm not a monster, I'm the devil. Like they kind of, as you mentioned, as we were leaving, I'm like, did I sleep through that line? And you said, well, you did the freak kind of mention, which is an approximation, sort of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if you get the rhythm and the intent of that line.
Yeah, but that's That's an iconic line from that movie. I feel like that solidifies Broly.
Would you have accepted Monster?
Yeah, I'm not a blank. I'm a blank. I really feel like you need to say I'm the devil, something like that. Like, the language was on par for that. The rest of the movie, they easily could have thrown that in there. In general, so I mean, this was a dub from what was this? I guess there's a website that could tell me when this came out. Kanzenshuu.com. So this was a dub from 2003.
15 years old.
Can't judge it in 2018.
I went into it wanting to be very lenient on it because I'm just so sick of, I'll put it this way. I know it's not going to be as good as the Japanese version. Yeah. So why not just enjoy it for what it is? Because it's easier to just go in and have a good time because I'm paying money to go see Dragon Ball in a movie theater with awesome audio and awesome visuals, and the English, that's just a byproduct. I don't need it to know what the story is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Again, it's a product that's existed for 15 years. They didn't redo it. It's that dub. You know what you're getting into at that point.
Let's talk about the things that were redone, like the audio quality of the background music and the visuals.
Yes. So this was absolutely the new remaster that recently hit streaming services in Japan and will hit Blu-ray later this year in Japan. And seemingly international. If they're using this for Fathom Events screening here in America, I have to imagine Funimation is going to get the rights to this video footage. Certainly explains why they haven't done any more repackagings of their own Blu-ray remasters of the movies. And even when they did a repackaging of those masters, they only did the DVD repackaging of those. That was a few years ago at this point. So I feel like the movies are in a good place where we're not oversaturated with Funimation movie releases, which is good because it looked absolutely beautiful.
Interesting choice of words too.
On a good screen, not a huge screen, not an amazing screen, which I think was right for this, because it's not like we're looking at some 70 millimeter film print. We're just looking at Dragon Ball movies on film. I thought it looked great on that screen.
I love just seeing every line painted onto cells.
Yeah.
All up in my face.
It was
even all the
really
cracks
nice.
and all the defects and all. Like it's even the colors. Like
I thought it looked wonderful.
The colors seem like the most accurate to what I assume these movies are intended to look like.
Yeah. So that was good. It did have the original Japanese score, which is another reason
helped.
It got me into
lot.
the theater. I love the movie 8 soundtrack. Like I'm tapping along to every piece of background music. I love the score to this movie.
You're like quasi singing along and humming along, and I don't care who I annoyed, but I'm singing along to Chala Head Chala, and we were singing the ending
burning
theme
fight
song.
At the end there. Yeah, it's good. So it sounded good. It looked good. It was very helpful. We got the almost right as the movie was starting, but they were clearly doing some
they're doing like promo
trivia
stuff
and promos in the meantime, and they were using Japanese clips, Crunchyroll sponsored stuff, which was awesome to be in the theater and to hear Masako Nozawa. And actually, the film started with this film's respective preview.
I was not expecting that.
That was great. And then I'm like, are they just going to play it subbed? Will they just play the
and
movie
then
subbed?
at that point, I was expecting people to like get up and leave the room, to be honest.
Really sad that that initial preview trailer was
wrong
squished.
Aspect ratio.
Yeah,
it was so jarring.
I'm like, oh god, are they gonna play the entire movie in the wrong aspect ratio? But no, then Puss in Boots came out in the correct aspect ratio, and we went from there.
I didn't know the mascot had a name.
It's Puss in Boots. It was one of the first that Toei did.
I thought it was just a random cat with a hat. I learned something new. Thank you, Mr. Trivia.
Toei, Puss in Boots, The Wonderful World of Puss in Boots, 1969, Toei.
Cute.
There you go. Anything else to say? Oh, your Trunks moment.
Oh, no, that wasn't what I was going to say, but actually, yeah. No, just Trunks is just gorgeous in this movie. Long hair, the jacket. So seeing it on a big screen, crisp and clear, the scene where they're at the picnic and singing karaoke, and just that look of bewilderment on his face when Krillin singing, and he's just like, is this considered good?
You know what I wanted to mention? I wanted to re-listen to it too. So apparently in March 2014, so a little over 4 years ago, you and I randomly decided to watch movie 8 and did a mini review of it on the podcast.
Really?
I'd be very curious to see what we said. I totally forgot to re-listen to it before recording this.
We might have to do a record scratch post insertion thingy.
Nah, I don't want to take the extra time to listen to it. One thing I'm curious if we addressed, just a couple real quick things about the movie itself. One is, so movie 8 is when Tadayoshi Yamamuro took over from Minoru Maeda in terms of animation supervision for the theatrical films. So this is like Yamamuro full go. And of course, we've got Koyama the whole time directing the story here. Overall, I think the movie looks great. You're talking about the line work is fantastic. Everything's right colors.
Some really interesting angles,
cool
too,
landscapes, angles, some really strange things with Broly and his colors and his power. There are a couple times, though, when Broly's on screen where I feel like his face is squished. He has a very narrow face.
It gets narrower as the movie goes on.
It's super weird.
And I guess maybe his neck's just getting bulkier.
I've always
felt that way, too.
Always noticed it, but having it on this giant screen in front of me just made it even worse. The ending to this movie gets worse every time I watch it.
Yeah, because it's nonsensical. I mean, no, I get giving power to Goku. That makes sense. But you're talking about the literal, and then the spaceship appears out of nowhere.
Punch to the gut, and then he just like turns it a little bit, and then he just kind of up and explodes. It's like all of those pieces sound like they could work, but there's something about it in motion in this particular way at that exact time.
Is this very abrupt?
It's so abrupt. It's so anticlimactic. It just felt like, oh God, we got to end the movie. We got to stop right now.
I think in this case, it's about the journey. About everyone getting slaughtered.
Yeah.
Everyone getting pummeled. There's some good hits in this movie.
There are. I guess let's briefly talk about the audience interaction.
Yes.
We had a fairly good audience. I've seen other people talk about, as much as I love Scott and I love Team 4-Star, the memes that transition over into general fandom popular culture can be a bit much at times. That's not their fault. Am I blaming the fandom? I guess I'm blaming the fandom. We didn't have that problem, which was very good.
Wait, are you saying like during screenings people were quoting
Team
abridged?
4-Star or abridged Broly movie 8 in particular, that kind of thing. Like that sucks.
Well, we had something sucky happen that had nothing to do with fandom, and that was someone fell asleep nearby us and was snoring, and I found it really distracting. I was like, you come to the movies and then you sleep through it? I mean, I get Broly's dumb, but come on.
If I made it through Dub Broly, I think you can make it through Dub Broly. For us, it was just we had some cheers.
My favorite part was
Piccolo always gets it.
Piccolo always gets the cheers, and that just gets me in the heart every single time. It's just heartwarming. It's like, I don't care who your actual favorite character is. I love seeing a room full of people come together during the cheesy and heroic Piccolo moments. Yes. Everyone,
so good.
It's not like we don't see that turban and the weighted gear. We all know who's under that cape.
And you get a couple of those like Piccolo.
And then like the slow clap, kind of sarcastic.
The slow clap came when Vegeta decided to get back into the fight, and it was just like,
yeah, Vegeta.
Like that actually really helped, and it wasn't too much. It was appropriate. It was an appropriate communal viewing experience there.
And I think there was also this shared collective, not disbelief. What's the word for exasperated?
Yeah,
frustration at how much of a whiny bitch Vegeta is in this movie. But that's why I like Vegeta in this movie, because he's like already so deflated before things even really have a chance to get going. But to see that like really transition to the audience getting frustrated, like sharing Piccolo's frustration with Vegeta, is just really fun. Even though we've all seen this movie before, we know what's happening, but it's just being in a live environment and experiencing it.
For sure.
Oh yeah, and then Trunks' jacket popping off. That's cool. And then he has less and less clothes as the movie goes on.
Well, everyone does.
Yeah.
Everyone's shirtless at the end of the movie. We got some cards. They gave us some Broly cards.
Brawler.
Our theater didn't have any posters or cardboard standees or anything.
I was ready for pictures. I was gonna go.
One time I'm prepared. So
it was fun.
It was worth doing. I am not gonna go see Bardock and movie 12. Meri,
because we've seen movie 12 before.
We've seen movie 12 dubbed in theaters before. Contrary to what Funimation and Toei and Fandango and Fathom will tell you, they actually did screen Dragon Ball Z movie 12 in theaters. We were already recording the podcast at that point.
That's how long ago.
We have the proof for it. And the Bardock, as we mentioned, the Bardock dub is kind of really bad, and that's something Jake and I are going to talk about in the near future here on the podcast. Anything else that was worth doing the one time?
It was just Because you know you're not going to get stuck in like a huge time investment for your afternoon with a bunch of trailers and nonsense.
Well, I mean,
You had a couple commercials, but they were relevant commercials.
Set movie times. It's really helpful. Oh, I guess we can mention at the end, I was curious if they were going to play the trailer for the new movie, but instead it was a thing about skateboards.
Yeah.
What? This is the thing that you're going to play at the end of the movie? It felt like one of those filler things before the movie, but they played it at the end, so... All right, so we did our due diligence. We went to see in 2018 a Dragon Ball Z film dubbed in theaters.
It's cool.
I've done my part. Meri, thank you for joining me here.
Mm-hmm. It was good to talk about it while it's still relatively fresh in our heads.
It was just yesterday.
It was just yesterday, but you know, today is yesterday, and tomorrow is... I messed up the quote. Too much time traveling.
Saw what you're doing and wanted to let you dig your own grave there. Again, I say thank you. Thanks to Jake. www.kanzenshuu.com. That is Kanzenshuu.com. This was episode 454 of our podcast. Thank you for joining us. Again, that was Meri. That was Jake. My name is Mike. We also have a Julian and a Heath. We will see you next time. Thank you very much for joining us. Meri, take us out.
This was Kanzenshuu, the podcast. Thank you for listening. Bye.